We talk a lot about our problems. It's sort of like political therapy, but sometimes that gets a little old and sad. We need solutions, man. If we who love liberty are the brave, forward-leaning explorers, the ones who embrace technology with unabashed optimism, then we need to stop bitching about problems. We need a plan for the most important and pressing issues we face. How will we solve the healthcare crisis? The education system is outdated and broken, but how do we fix it? Who should we let into this country, and how do we solve the immigration riddle? Here's the plan. We got one. This is The Independence. Moment chance. Hi there, I'm Kennedy, your hostess with Reason Magazine, editor-in-chief, Matt Welch, who's got a smile and solutions, and Camille Foster from Freethink Media, an entrepreneur who knows how to preneur it. All right, together we are The Independents. Wow, 1, 2, 3. There we go, the holy trinity of solutions. It is tax season, and for many people, it's depression season as well. The government has no problem reaching into your pants and extracting your pennies. But what are you getting for the investment? Paying taxes is an exercise in confusion and frustration. Politicians have promised for years to simplify the tax code. Now is the time. Let's do this. Here's a man with the plan, so you don't have to get buggered by the man. We spoke with Utah Senator Mike Lee earlier about his vision for a simpler, happier tax season. Senator Mike Lee, welcome to The Independence for the first time.
Thank you.
It is tax season. People they're a little sad, they're a little depressed. They're seeing their money go to some bad projects, bad plans, entitlements, and they want change, they want reform. This show is all about plans for tackling the future. What is your plan for fixing bad tax code?
You know, I've got a tax reform proposal that I call the Family Fairness Opportunity Tax Reform Act, or FFOTRA. Doesn't make for a great acronym, but it is great policy. Here's what it does. It gets rid of the marriage tax penalty and also the parent tax penalty. It takes our current system, which is really complex and hard to follow, converts it into a two-rate system. Most Americans would file under one rate of 15%. Anyone making up to $87,850 if filing singly, or twice that amount if filing as a married person filing jointly, would pay under that 15% rate. And people making above those amounts would pay at a rate of 35%. At both rates, people would be eligible for two deductions, one for charitable contributions and the other one for mortgage interest. But the most distinguishing and important feature about this plan is that it would create a new additional $2,500 per child tax credit. This is there to help offset the parent tax penalty, reflecting the fact that today's working parents are taxed twice relative to our senior entitlement programs. Once when they actually make their income and pay their taxes, and again as they incur the substantial costs associated with raising children.
And do parents, do they pay the brunt of the tax whipping post?
Yes, parents do, relative to our senior entitlement programs, Social Security and Medicare. Because we have to remember that these programs are funded on a pay-as-you-go basis. In other words, it's today's workers who are paying the benefits for today's retirees. But it's today's children who will be paying the retirement benefits of today's workers. And so parents really are a necessary part of this process, and parents need to be recognized for the substantial contribution that they make to our senior entitlement programs.
Senator,
our existing tax structure doesn't acknowledge that.
Senator, one of the interesting things about your tax plan is that it eliminates state and local tax deductions, which makes people who live in, I don't know, New York and California a little bit sadder than those who live in Utah. Can you talk us through why we should be paying more taxes here in blue states?
Yeah, so the point is not to raise anyone's taxes so much as it is to say the federal government shouldn't be subsidizing and rewarding those states that choose to have really high income tax rates. Those states can choose to do that if they want to, but taxpayers in other states shouldn't be forced to pay higher rates as a result of the fact that some states charge higher taxes.
Now, Senator, there are some things that you are holding on to, as you mentioned. We're still holding on to the mortgage interest deduction. You're capping that at about $300,000, but that is a tax that has come under some criticism from a few folks who would say that that is somewhat regressive. There are plenty of people who do not own homes and can't take that tax deduction. Why not a simpler tax plan that doesn't even include that sort of incentive baked into the tax code?
Well, we think this is an important compromise. We think this allows our economy to benefit from the value of this kind of tax deduction, but it caps it out so that, most people are still able to reap its benefits, but it's capped out. Millionaires don't necessarily need this. If you're buying a house that's significantly more expensive than that, then you don't necessarily need to rely on this tax deduction provided by the federal government.
You've talked a lot about free market populism as a winnable electoral idea, and some of the ideas behind this tax plan are directly sort of trying to attract the middle class. Do you think the Republican Party has forgotten how to talk to the middle class in terms of economic policies?
I don't think the Republican Party has forgotten how to talk to the middle class, but I do think we can do much better. I think to some extent, as Republicans, we've been a little bit too willing sometimes to wear the caricatured label painted of us by the left, the label that says somehow we're the party of the top 1%, the party of the country club. That isn't true. The fact is that we are conservative, not in spite of our compassion. We are conservative because we are compassionate. True conservative principles, properly implemented in good policies, will bring about real benefits for the poor and the middle class in America, and that's why we're conservative.
All right. Well, one of the accolades that Senator Rand Paul has gotten is for the flat tax in his budget. What's wrong with the flat tax, and how is yours any different? Your rejiggering of the tax brackets different from Rand Paul's flat tax?
The advantage to this system, the one that I have proposed, is that it puts us in a position where we don't have to raise the taxes of anyone who can be described as a middle-class taxpayer or a poor taxpayer. If you go to a single rate system, it's a little bit harder to do that. Another way of describing it is that, in making any kind of a transition to a more simple tax code, you're going to have some real shock in the system if you go straight from a 5, 6, or 7 rate system to a single rate system. You can cushion a lot more of that blow, of that shock, if you convert it instead into a 2-rate system, and that's what we've done here.
All right, is there any way of making taxes a sexy enough issue that it could be the centerpiece of a presidential election?
Well, tax reform is a big issue to a lot of Americans. I think it'll be one of many things that Americans will be focused on this election year, this midterm election year, but also in 2016. I certainly think that's a possibility in any election year. It's probably not enough in and of itself. But I do think that this kind of middle class, pro-growth, anti-poverty tax reform plan is one that really will play well throughout America, and it'll inure to the benefit of Republicans if Republicans will grab onto this.
All right. Thank you very much, Senator Lee.
Thank you.
When you think of what's broke and needs
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America, Barack Obama.
Smooth, Joe. I guess Joe with that statist pirate mouth. Good Lord. Obamacare has the potential to drag down the economy and force a wedge of resentment between generations. It looks to be a bureaucratic, job-sucking monster whose tentacles have only started penetrating your sickly vessel. This is one where we need to stop the incessant whining. We need to plan a solid, workable blueprint that will get us out of this mess and allow us to stop spending so damn much on health care. Michael Cannon lays awake at night and dreams of ways to repeal Obamacare. He's a crafty healthcare lover who knows there is hope for the sick system. He is the Cato Institute Director of Health Policy. Welcome, Michael.
How do you know what I dream about?
I'm psychic. I know your vision, Stevie Nicks. So tell me, what is the plan for fixing healthcare?
Well, in an important sense, we who support markets don't have a plan. We have policy proposals, but really the plan for making healthcare more affordable and improving healthcare quality is 1,000 different plans in the minds of thousands or millions of people we've never met and will never meet. We need markets in order to capture those ideas and bring them to consumers. The problem is that we've got so many centrally directed plans out of Washington, from the Medicare program to the Medicaid program, now to Obamacare, that are blocking the market processes that would make health care more affordable and better for American patients, that we've got rising health care costs. We've got stagnant and often horrific quality in our healthcare sector. We need to remove those barriers, and the first one we need to remove is Obamacare.
We do, and one of the plans when people talk about replacing Obamacare, because Medicaid is now certainly tied to Obamacare, is offering block grants to Medicaid, and that would allow states to sort of dole out money where they see fit. Does this go far enough in starting to fix the healthcare problem?
Well, I think block grants would be a good step toward getting the federal government out of providing health care for the poor entirely, and maybe even getting state governments out of it. Because what you're talking about when you're trying to provide health care for the poor is navigating the Samaritan's dilemma. You want to help people you want to provide health care to people who can't afford it themselves, but you don't want to be so generous that people don't take care of themselves, that they don't take steps to ensure that they can provide for themselves, get health insurance and that sort of thing. There's no one obvious way to navigate that Samaritan's dilemma, and so you want different experiments, just like you want experiments in every other corner of the healthcare sector. And the best way to do that is get it out of Washington, where Washington is dictating one-size-fits-all rules. Let the states make these decisions with money that local officials have to raise and impose through taxes. And then you'll get a lot of different experiments, and we'll learn from better ways of providing health care to the poor.
Well, Mike, I certainly broadly agree with you. I think one of the things that stands out in my mind is when we talk about health care is that Americans have been concerned about health care for a very long time. The situation you described, where we are concerned about the quality of care as well as the constantly increasing cost, that situation existed prior to Obamacare. And as you outlined, it's because the government has always been heavily involved in markets. One of the questions that's important is how we get from where we were then, or perhaps where we are now, to a much freer system. One of the ideas that I find most intriguing are the ideas that are laid out in David Goldhill's book, where we're looking at a situation broadly of health savings accounts for most people in this country, and perhaps in his particular framework, a system of very high universal catastrophic coverage for most people, which kind of gets us the best of both worlds, perhaps. I wonder if you've looked at this plan, if you think that might be workable broadly for our system in terms of moving us closer to a free market system.
Look, if you want a thorough and well-reasoned critique of America's healthcare sector, you can't beat David Goldhill. The problem is that David then prescribes, he's basically documenting government failure after government failure after government failure, and then at the end of the book he says, well, so what we need is for the government to control our healthcare sector and direct it in other ways, put people into this type of health insurance instead of the type of health insurance that it has picked for decades now. And yeah, if we move more people into catastrophic health insurance, then that will maybe reduce some consumption. But you got to remember that the same political forces that have caused government's involvement in healthcare to metastasize to where we are right now are going to exist. And so if the government's still directing people to buy a particular type of health insurance, we're going to end up in the same place that we are right now. What the government needs to do is not adopt a policy of universal coverage, but pull back, let consumers control the money that they earned, stop subsidizing Medicare enrollees with a government-designed plan. Just give them a check like the Social Security program does and trust them to spend it.
Yeah, that's part of Bobby Jindal's plan, too. I mean, Jindal just released his plan that included block grants and giving older Americans money to buy their own coverage.
Well, and Jindal's plan is a little bit closer to what I'm talking about. In fact, I think that when he's talking about his proposal for reforming the employer-based health insurance system and for reforming Medicare, they're closer to what I would like to see than any other Republican plan that I have seen so far. But even his plan shows that Republicans' ideas are just not ready for prime time.
Michael, very quickly, you talked about experiments and also about getting the government out of helping even with catastrophic care. Let me do the job of the Center for American Progress for them and say, aren't you experimenting on letting poor and very sick, chronically ill people die?
Well, look, we heard this a lot during the debate over Obamacare. Some people said that if you block Obamacare, you're going to be killing thousands of people. But when you look at the evidence, it's really not that clear at all. And once if you look at the best evidence on Medicaid, which was a randomized controlled trial that was conducted in Oregon, looked at the most vulnerable people that Obamacare would enroll in Medicaid. And after 2 years of giving them thousands of dollars more medical care, they could find no discernible change in the measured physical health outcomes in that study. There's a huge question mark over whether Medicaid and other government expansions of coverage actually improve health or save lives or not.
All right,
There's
Michael
similar
Cannon, we have to go.
evidence
We're up against a hard break, which means you have to come back and explain in greater detail, even more plans, because we love them.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. If we are going to send someone to Mars, that someone has to die. We're all going to die, but could that someone be you? A plan for getting the government out of your moonshot. And we'll give you our super secret, ultra special plan for weaning off the succulent foreign teat next. Welcome back to The Independents, where we are solving the greatest problems facing mankind, one avertible disaster at a time. Matt, Camille, and I spent a lot of time discussing and debating just exactly how we're going to keep going as a species and a planet. We are energy-sucking machines. Yes, good job. Us, we have robust appetites and thus need big solutions to meet our growing demands. And here is my plan for energy. Number one, frack it up, baby. Stop being so squeamish about fracking. Do you want cars and buses to run? Do you want to move the economy in the right direction, or do you want to shrivel and let China engorge itself on our energy capitulation? No. Get off the foreign oil, stop supporting oppressive regimes, and convert sweet, gassy shale to cleaner natural gas. Number two, maximize private mass transportation. I hate subsidized mass transit, but I love the idea of cleaner air and natural gas-fueled buses. Expand private transpo beyond cars, and I guarantee buses and trains will be cleaner, more efficient, and sexier. And they can all be powered with that shale-tastic natural gas. Number three, get green, people. If you live in the city, ride your bike. The energy you use can be your own. You'll improve your health, lose weight, and be less dependent on Obamacare, which will render that corpulent beast useless. Smaller asses, fewer gases, and rich people who live in suburban and rural areas should power their Teslas with Taj Mahals of solar and wind. It's not terribly efficient, but it'll make you feel better, and it'll ultimately make that cheaper for the rest of us. Matt, what is your big fancy plan?
One, before looking for a magic bullet that's going to solve everything, realize that we don't have a magic bullet right now. If we did, we would have solved the energy crisis 40 years ago, which is the first time a president said we're going to get off foreign oil. Darn it, in 5 years. It doesn't really exist. If you actually deal with the reality as it exists, not some 20 years, solar is going to solve all the world's problems, and look at prices, the way they're allocated, you'll make different decisions than if you're planning for a future that isn't out there. So be mindful of that. Two, markets, not mandates, right? Everyone loves to say in 20 years, we're going to use 13.5% of all of our energy consumption is going to come from wind power in the Mojave Desert. No, no, no. When you do that, you're going to distort the market, unfortunately. You're basically predicting a future and locking yourself in. All the companies that are developing energy are going to go and produce that, not because it's cheap, but because the government has mandated it. Get the government out of giving subsidies to everyone, starting with oil companies, going next to coal, going next to all the large incumbents. Let there be a free market for fuel. May the best fuel win on this, including newer and cleaner technologies, and proliferate markets. And third, and this is the most practical, mine the moon. Let's get some spacecraft up on the moon. Stop this whole there can be no private property up there. No, let's have mining rights, drilling rights. And actually, NASA is working on this just right now. They're promulgating regulations and accepting applications for people to look at, see what kind of minerals we have up there. Let's extract them, get the government out of the monopoly space travel business, and let's mine that thing.
Very good. Camille, what is your plan?
I like your bold vision. Let me take a step back, start again with foreign oil. This is the third time it's been mentioned. I think we should stop worrying about who's selling us oil. Fossil fuels are what we're using today. They're cheap. They're relatively affordable. In a universe where there aren't stupid regulations that are preventing us from producing our own energy here at home, I don't see any reason for us to not participate in a market that helps to bring folks together, hopefully diffuse all sorts of tensions, and possibly create a world where things are a little more peaceful. The second thing is, when it comes to public utilities, the government has a tendency to favor large, centralized power provisioning for most Americans. There's absolutely no reason why things necessarily need to be like that in the future. I would love to see a competitive, free market solution to delivering energy to people's homes. Any number of ways could work. Something decentralized could possibly be really, really awesome for us,
And
whether it's solar or bloom boxes.
All right, so your moon thing, that's like going to Ohio to get your oxygen. It doesn't make any sense. It's a nice, big, fun idea, but how are you going to transport oil back to the United States?
It's not, but you're not going to get oil from up there. You're going to get helium-3. You're going to get things that you don't know currently exist. Some of them might have something to do with energy. Most of them
If
won't.
private companies want to explore there, that's fine.
Exactly. Get out of the way of people who want to create and solve the future.
And by the way, why does free trade have to include oppressive regimes? Why does it have to include places like Saudi Arabia?
I think the goal is to try to open doors.
We don't
and to
open
bridge
doors. The
and
doors
to-
are closed, especially for women.
Well,
It's
again,
a bad system. I mean, Venezuela, I'm fine with Canada.
What I'm arguing
I'm fine
for-
with Mexico. Ghana, intriguing now that we've seen big men, but
Sure.
Nigeria, places like that.
But our actual reliance on foreign oil has gone way down. We used to import 13 million
Because
barrels.
of fracking, and it will go down even more if we really look into the beautiful natural resources we've got in this country.
And
it makes the
ultimately,
earth
we
cleaner.
extract stuff much better than other people extract stuff because we know how to do
Right.
things a little better than Saudi Arabia. And we will invent those future technologies more than any damn mullah in Riyadh.
trading with nefarious regimes is perhaps one of the best ways to actually influence them to do good things. You can certainly abstain
it's worked
and
real
stay.
well at this
You can
point.
stay out of it. I would certainly say that trade with China has probably helped to liberalize that country.
It's liberalized the economy, but
I
certainly
think
not the
liberalizing
society.
the economy and
there's
putting
a
money in
difference.
people's pockets actually helps to liberalize the society too. That's my argument.
Okay,
I might be wrong.
But those are big theoretical dreams that don't always manifest themselves in reality. Frack away, baby.
All right.
God, I love being right. All right. Well, already we've covered energy, health, and taxes, but people are still dying to get into this country. Should we charge people for citizenship? That is one plan for immigration, and we will debate it next. This is The Independence, and this show is all about solving problems and taking names. Here's the plan. No issue is too great or too divisive for us to solve, so let's dive into one that no one can quite get a handle on, and that is immigration. One plan is to offer amnesty to 11 million people already in this country, seal up the southern border, and call it good. Another plan is to charge people who want to come here $50,000 for citizenship, which is not only impractical, could be downright cruel. Well, let's meet the man who has that plan and see if we can find some common ground. Ed Lazier is the former chair of the White House Council of Economic Advisors. He worked under President George W. Bush. Welcome to the show, Ed.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Excellent. So tell me about this citizenship fee and why are you so excited about it?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm so excited about it. What I'm excited about is trying to find a rational way to allocate our immigration slots. We need to have immigration. We need to have good immigration. We need to have more immigration. One of the things that's very important to remember is that we are an aging society. By bringing in immigrants, we get young people with energy and people who are going to create new products and new ideas for our society. So that's a good thing.
All right, let's cut to the
Question is,
chase. You
how
want to
do we
charge
allocate-
$50,000 for citizenship. You want to sell citizenship slots for $50,000 apiece, which basically means that no poor Mexicans can immigrate to the United States.
That's not true. That's not true at all. In fact, one of the studies that I did when I was chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors was to look at the difference between the wages that people get when they're here and the wages they get in Mexico. That difference is about $10,000 a year. Now, obviously, they couldn't pay that up front, and no one would argue that they should pay that up front. You certainly have to have an ability to finance that. But if you paid even $2,000 a year, you're talking about a couple of decades of a $2,000 payment, which is like a fine in some sense for those who are here illegally. And they could pay that off over time, and it would be well worth
Oh, yeah, that's totally
their
worth it. Yeah,
time to do it.
a family of four paying $200,000, that totally makes sense. And then you can just garnish the breadwinner's wages. So he's making, what, $4,000 a year? Totally practical. Yeah, that makes absolute sense, and that's great for business, too.
Well, you
Ed.
won't. You're not going to get families of four coming in for the most part, not initially. What you tend to
so you're
get
breaking up
is
families.
the younger people. No. Wait a minute. Who are the immigrants right now? Who are the H-1Bs? Who are the people who come in right now? Well, first of all, they tend to be young. That's a good thing. and they tend to be single. Now, why is that? Well, because the people who can afford to immigrate, even right now, are the ones who are young and single. It's not easy to get to the United States. In fact, it's very unfair under the current system, because if you don't happen to have a relative in the United States right now, you virtually have no chance of getting in. So what this does is it opens it up. It's a much fairer system. It allows those people who want to come into the United States and who can actually contribute to the United States to come in, irrespective of the country that they happen to be from. They don't have to be from a country where there are already lots of immigrants here. The plan that we have right now favors those who happen to be here, happen to be fortunate enough to have relatives who are here, and happen to be fortunate enough to have relatives who are able to successfully get them in. That's not a fair structure.
So you're ripping up, just to clarify your system, you're ripping up all national country-based immigration. You're ripping up all the kind of system that we have here, and we're reducing it all to an X number, whatever that number is going to be, and everyone has to pay 50 grand to get in, right?
Well, 50 may not be the right number, but some number. The reason for doing that, again, is that you want those people to come here who value citizenship the most. And again, you know, as I answered earlier, you can't expect people to pay that up front, and we certainly wouldn't argue that you should have people pay that up front.
You're also going to create a black market of employment, because what are you going to do, work and get thousands of dollars a month taken from your paycheck to try and earn money, or are you going to earn cash straight up without paying any taxes?
Even people, hang on, even people who are here, families who are here, can spend many years, 20 years, trying to get a loved one into this country. That's neither fair nor is it appropriate in terms of the way we want to allocate our slots. Well, so let's say that you're a person who's here from the Philippines and you have a relative in the Philippines who you'd love to have here. You'd be willing to pay $2,000 a year for 20, 25 years in order to have that person here.
I started out as pretty skeptical of your idea.
You have no
I've probably warmed up to it just a bit, especially when I take a look at the fact that we do have an entitlement system here that makes it challenging to have open immigration, as I might prefer. But would you be open to sponsorships as well from corporations? And is there any sort of loan or borrowing against that principle that folks might be able to do?
Well, you would expect to see a good bit of that. Look, if you're a firm in Silicon Valley and you can bring a person in from India or China with high skills and it costs you $50,000, you might be inclined to do that. And obviously, if you can do that, fine, that's great. But again, the goal of the system is not just to bring people in. The goal of the system is to, one, be fair, two, bring the best people in, and three, to deal with our illegal problem. This does a great job of dealing with the illegal problem because we don't have to decide whether there's amnesty. We don't have to decide whether we're going to prosecute those people. All we do is we say, if you want to be here legally, start paying the fee and you're here legally, and it completely deals with that problem. So that's a nice aspect of it as well. I think it's not a perfect system. We wouldn't argue it's a perfect system. What we argue is that it's a much better system, it's a much more efficient system, and it's a much fairer system than the one we have now.
It's a plan.
It's it creates more levels of bureaucracy
than it solves, but it certainly is a plan. Ed, thank you very much for your time.
Why do you say that?
Because if you have a loan system that is beholden to the government, of course, what are you going to do? Create entire new levels of government to fixate on those loans?
No.
Oh,
it's an annual fee. You pay it as part of your tax.
Are you going to expand E-Verify? I mean, what is this magical fee that is going to get paid with?
It's not a perfect system. It's a much better system, and it's superior than anything I've seen as an alternative.
Ed, I want you to have a system that's so great that you say this system is awesome. Because if you've got a system that you say, well, it kind of sucks, it's really not the plan we're looking for, Ed. Go back to the drawing board. Come back to me in 8 months, okay?
I don't think so, but let's try this one first.
Okay, thank you very much. Ed Lazier from the Hoover Institution. All right, fixing education and the beautiful tension between public and private space travel. You want to go to the moon, Alice? We got a plan for that. It's The Independent. Stay with us.
If you think only governments have what it takes to go to the moon, think again. 30 private teams from 16 countries competing in the largest incentivized prize competition in history to go back to the moon.
Dude, that is better than Back to the Future. I'm telling you, we look up into the heavens and we see nothing but infinite possibility, the ultimate mystery to conquer space. Now, we've been to the moon on the government's dime, but there are so many corners of the universe that would be better traversed through private space exploration. But what is the plan for getting there, and how do we inspire fertile minds to think outside the cube? Christopher Frangione, is the vice president of XPRIZE, and his organization has found a way of establishing benchmarks and fueling a new lust for space exploration. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So this is really exciting. The idea that not only civilians will be able to go into orbit, but we might actually be able to go to the moon. How does XPRIZE work, and how is it working?
Sure. So at XPRIZE, we put out these large-scale competitions, incentivized innovation competitions, to get people to do things that are for the benefit of humanity. And this one that you just heard about is a $30 million one to land a lunar on the moon. And these competitions are really great because they democratize innovation. Just like you said, the government has been doing this, but the private sector also can do it. It just needs a little bit of a push, and it needs great minds focused on the challenge. And when you put out a prize competition, what you're doing is you're democratizing that innovation and allowing anybody, whether they have 20 years of experience or 20 days of experience, to compete for the competition. As long as they achieve the goal, they win.
And what kind of people enter?
Sure. So you'll see anything from garage innovators to university teams to established players, and that's the beauty of it. If you did a grant, you would know who your solver community was, and you wouldn't go for one of these new entrants to the industry because they would be too risky for you. But in a prize competition, you're pushing all that risk onto the competitors themselves, and so you're able to have all these great minds focused on the challenge. And again, like I said, you're just giving it to whoever wins. It's a pretty simple model.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the modern history of the prize competition model? We're having driverless cars pretty soon here, in part because of prize competition. What have we already gotten out of this sort of gamification or prizeification of innovation? Yeah,
so it's a great model that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. In fact, 2014 is the 300th anniversary of the British Longitude Prize, which was about navigation. But in recent history, you've seen folks like the government doing exactly what you said, driverless cars, through their DARPA challenges. You've seen us incentivize commercial spaceflight. We're also incentivizing handheld health diagnostics, and in addition to ocean health sensors to make the world a better place. But lots of governments, private sector, philanthropists are using this model to ensure that they get the best value out of their investment dollars.
All right, and what about going to Mars? I've heard that if we're going to send someone to Mars, astronauts have to be prepared to die. Will the next big competition for you guys be sending people to the red planet?
So we focus on moving the needle a certain degree. So if something was going to happen in 15 or 20 years, we want it to happen in 5 or 7 years. So what we're doing is we're not solving the grand challenge itself. We're taking a bite out of it. We're taking a step towards it. And so our Lunar Lander Challenge, the one we were talking about earlier, is a first step in then reaching other planets in our solar system. So I don't think we would do a competition to go to Mars, but we will incentivize pieces of that grand challenge to ensure that there's an opportunity for the private sector and the government to go to Mars.
Christopher, this is great. Thank you so much. And I have such high hopes for private space exploration. I really think it is the future and will engage us in such great exploration and will deliver so many new technologies. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, if you have kids in public school, you're probably sick to death of testing. I know I am. I hate testing. There has to be a better way. Working our way through the education bubble, one expert has a plan for the future of knowledge. Next. This is The Independence. We are crafting and celebrating various plans for a variety of challenges, and we've really backed ourselves into a corner with our kids. How do we stay globally competitive without destroying young minds and spirits? What is a solid plan for reworking a tired and limp education system? Glenn Reynolds is the author of The New School. Welcome back to The Independence, Glenn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Oh, Glenn, tell me there's a better way than Common Core and the infernal testing that goes along with it.
Oh, there are a lot of better ways, actually. One of the interesting things about Common Core is it's a standardized approach. It's sort of a 19th century industrial approach to education, really. When we're in the 21st century and customization is what's going on in every part of the world that's working, So you'd think that we'd be looking for more of a customized approach for our kids, since, as it turns out, kids are different.
How can we do that? What is the plan for bringing a customized model that is so desperately needed in education in this country?
Well, to some degree, you're already seeing it. 20 years ago, there were only a few options. If you didn't like to send your kids to the public schools, you basically had some local private school, maybe a religious school, maybe one that sort of pretended to be Tony and fancy, and that was basically it. Now you have homeschooling with a whole lot of different resources available. You've got a number of different online approaches. We have a lot of charter schools and things like that. And there's just so much ferment in the area now. There's much more than there's been in the past 100 years. And what we really are learning is kids have a lot of different learning styles. Different things work for different kids. And as we get better at testing kids, not to see that they meet some general common core thing, but rather to see how they specifically look at things, we can tailor approaches to that. And some people are really doing good work in that area.
Then when it comes to higher education, we know that for a long time we've seen prices going up, and there are very serious questions about whether or not folks are actually getting bang for their buck in terms of the return on that investment. How do we fix that particular problem?
Well, the biggest problem with higher education is a cost problem. And what we've seen is that since 1983, tuitions have gone up 5 times in constant dollars, whereas salaries of graduates have been roughly flat. And for a long time, people made up the difference with borrowed money, but we've really come to the end of that. People have realized that big student loan debts are a disaster and a debacle. If I had a single fix, honestly, it would be to get U.S. News to factor cost and particularly the leanness of administrators versus teaching faculty into their rankings formula. And since universities care about that a lot, they'd probably change things immediately.
Yeah, you've said that universities rarely cut administrators since they're the one who make the rules, but they are laying off faculty and allowing fewer students in.
Well, I mean, that's exactly right. We actually have in higher education as a whole now more full-time administrators than we have full-time faculty. And at many schools, the imbalance is very substantial. And when they want to cut costs, what they do is they get rid of full-time faculty and they replace them with adjuncts who work for peanuts on semester-long or year-long contracts. But why? Nobody's ever talked about an adjunct administrator. Why not have short-term, low-paid, contract-working administrators?
Glenn, let's blow some stuff up metaphorically here in the higher education system. Start with student loans. What do you do differently instead of the system that we have right now?
Well, right now, universities have an incentive basically to squeeze as much money out of the student loan system as they can. And if the students wind up burdened and with no job, that's their problem. And it's a big problem because the loans aren't even dischargeable in bankruptcy. I go back to the old system where we made student loans dischargeable in bankruptcy 5 years after graduation. I'd even be willing to go as far as 7. But I would put the universities on the hook for a percentage of that, say 10 or 20%. And then they have a strong incentive not to get students burdened with more debt than they can be expected to handle when they get out.
Can you get the state out of the accreditation game? Is that viable?
Yeah, and that's actually something Senator Mike Lee has proposed. He's proposed to let states, as opposed to the guilds that sort of do accreditation now, approve different programs outside of sort of traditional higher education, things that certify people or provide sort of trade, industrial training and things like that in ways that they're not available now in the hopes of opening up a bigger marketplace for that.
All right, Glenn Reynolds, author of The New School. Go get the book. Glenn, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You've heard the issues, you've seen the plans. Now, how can we wean off of a stale political system? The plan for becoming an independent, next.
As it looks, books and books around concepts and hooks, session to session to get thoughts manifested.
Underpants. Hi, welcome back to The Independents, where we are sifting through a number of plans from healthcare to immigration, and now here's our plan for becoming an independent. Here is my 5-step plan. Step 1, admit that all politicians are douchebags. Step 2, admit the world is changing, it's a lot cooler, and it requires your participation. Step 3, admit you're a partisan tool and you vote blindly for idiots. Step 4, vote outside your party at least once an election cycle. Do some research, it'll be good for you, you'll love it. And step number 5, examine your beliefs. Engage people you disagree with, and don't be afraid to evolve. Your beliefs can be dynamic, and knowing this is a very important step to becoming an independent. Matt, what is your plan?
Step 1, detox. Step away from the politics, the social media. all cable news programming except for the Fox Business Network and particularly the independents, and just get out of politics just for a week. See what that's like. Don't get into political arguments. Don't argue with your high school friend who you never talk to on Facebook. Step out of it. Do something that you like to do, that you enjoy in life. Then come back a week later and then re-engage and discover how much of that is just kind of nonsense. You're adding to the problem. You're not adding to the solution of it. To give you a little bit of a perspective. And step 2, I've only got 2 instead of 5, is criticize first and then learn to vote against your own tribe, no matter who they are, even if it's a narrow little libertarian freakazoid tribe that some of us may or may not belong to. If you don't have the intellectual rigor to say, hey, look, bro, you're wrong about this, like Camille about lots of things, or you about foreign oil, then you are going to let your brain go soft. And once you start doing that, you start apologizing for your friends, you start apologizing for people who otherwise, you agree with. It's a bad thing. What the Tea Party has taught us is that people who start to vote against and criticize their own team can suddenly make that team act differently. And I wish the Democrats would start doing that on civil liberties and other issues that mean a lot to the voters, not as much to the politicians.
I've got a one-point plan. I've reduced this still further.
Hear it.
Vote your conscience. There is no such thing as a wasted vote. Plenty of people acknowledge freely. Plenty of people acknowledge freely that Democrats and Republicans have way too much in common, that once these guys get elected, they pretty much always do the same thing. If that's the case, stop voting for them. You might want to stay home, fine. Or you might actually want to vote for the other guy. And by the other guy, I don't mean the lesser of the two evils. I mean a guy like a Gary Johnson, who may perhaps embody the values that you believe in. If that 1% ticks up to 2 and then perhaps 5, that is a good thing. It sends a strong signal, and perhaps, just by chance, enough people will catch on and it'll become a trend. Vote your conscience.
I think, like perestroika, independence begins in the home. It's a way of approaching life and to get out of the usual rut of the way that you think. So start.
Yeah, and it's all about DIY, baby. Do it yourself. Think for yourself. Don't be afraid to embrace the future. And you can feel free to add your own plans and suggestions on our Facebook page. You never know. You might be the next great political architect. If what you saw here was malarkey, don't worry. Stay optimistic. The solution may be closer than you think. You might be soaking in it. All right, for Matt Welch and Camille Foster, thank you for making us a part of your plan. I'm Kennedy. Good night.